If you're an NFL player, your prime years are your 20s. Some players keep playing into their 30s, and for an exceptionally rare few, they stay on the field as players into their 40s, the football equivalent of geriatric. Last week, Aaron Rodgers, now age 41 and quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, faced off against the Cincinnati Bengals. And with Bengals' younger franchise quarterback benched with an injury, it was veteran Joe Flacco, age 40, leading his team. With their helmets on, neither quarterback looked past his prime. Both were running, both evading tackles, both throwing incredible passes down the field. It was a masterclass, a clinic on how wisdom and experience more than makes up for youthful energy. Likewise, the most fruitful years in your walk with God come after many years of spiritual growth, as you bear fruit in season for His glory. Welcome to Haven Today. I'm David Wollen, sharing the great story that's all about Jesus, and on this Monday, we're beginning a series called Jesus in Every Season. Today, we're going to be talking broadly about seasons of life, but we'll home in on one season in particular. As my guest calls it, the afternoon of life. When kids leave home, but you're still active, grandkids may be entering the picture. It's an amazing opportunity.
A pastor friend of mine said that he observes that for a number of Christians, the 50s and 60s is like a fork in the road. Some of them just go from strength to strength in their zeal and for Jesus and their joy in Him. Others just take the foot off the pedal and just begin to go easy. And I wanted to encourage brothers and sisters to keep firing on all cylinders.
The voice of Christopher Ash, one of my very favorite Christian writers. It's rare to find someone who is both a brilliant scholar and yet also down-to-earth and pastoral, or to put it another way, someone whose sharp mind is balanced by an equally warm heart. And that's Christopher Ash. And if you're like me in the second half of life, and you know there's more road behind you than out in front, and you're wondering, how will you run this leg of the race? There are all these books written for younger people, parenting, marriage, but what about for this part of life? Few people talk about that, but Christopher Ash does, brilliantly, in his new book, Not Old, Not Young, Not Done. The subtitle is Following Jesus in Your 50s and 60s. But I can say, as someone in my mid to late 40s, this was a message I needed. And also for someone post-60s, especially in today's world. The afternoon of life is a little bit broader, and it's about walking with Jesus. This is a book worth your time. It's about staying young at heart, full of life and joy and hope. And it's our way of saying thank you for your gift to support Haven. You can make that gift by phone at 865-HAVEN, 865-HAVEN, or online at haventoday.org. Again, haventoday.org. This is Haven Today. I'm David Wollen, and joining us now is someone who has really just deeply helped and blessed my own walk with the Lord as well as my ministry, although we've only technically just met a few moments ago. Christopher Ash is writer in residence at Tyndale House in Cambridge. In the past, also a pastor and a trainer of preachers and, of course, an author. So, Christopher Ash, welcome to Haven Today.
Thank you so much, David. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, some may recognize your name, and the first thought that comes to their mind is theologian, scholar, or commentator. All of that, I think, would be correct. Personally, I've benefited tremendously from your work in the Psalms in particular. There's a 4-volume Christ-centered commentary that just came out very recently, a couple years ago, which is just monumental. It's wonderful. So thank you for your work in that space. But you write a lot of books that come from more of a kind of a pastoral engagement kind of a style as well, don't you?
I do. I think I'm a pastor at heart.
Well, it comes through in your books, and there's one that you've just written that is so much in that sphere of things that we in God's flock are struggling with or are aspiring to, and it just sort of touches a nerve on something that we think. I'm so glad somebody's talking about this, and in just reading your brand new book, Not Old, Not Young, Not Done, you did that. But I think you described it as a book that you wish had been available to you, right?
Yes, I'm beyond that. I'm done, according to the title.
No, you're
I'm
not.
in I'm in my early 70s. So the idea for this book came through various conversations, and it was just this thought that in most of the world and most human history, the 50s and 60s are the end of life for
Mm,
most people. But in our rich, mainly Western societies, they're not usually the end of life. They're a kind of in-between
yeah.
stage.
Right. Yeah. And in your book, you have this poetic imagery that you use throughout. You call it the afternoon of life, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because we're here in the fall. I live in the Midwest. I love this time of year, and I love afternoons at this time of year. I just and so I've been sitting outside enjoying that, reading your book about the afternoon of life, and that appeals to me. But when I think about the afternoon of my own life, suddenly that's a little bit less of a welcome thought. There's something a little anxious maybe in our souls that gets stirred up when we start to think about, if my life has an afternoon, it has an evening, and it has something beyond that as well. So how do you think about that, and why do we need to talk about it now?
Yes, I think a pastor friend of mine said that he observes that for a number of Christians, the 50s and 60s is like a fork in the road.
Yeah.
And some of them, I kind of painted one or two little word pictures of some of them in the book. Some of them just go from strength to strength in their zeal and for Jesus and their joy in him. Others just take the foot off the pedal and just begin to go easy. And
Mm.
I wanted to encourage brothers and sisters who lived through that stage of life to keep firing on all cylinders
Yeah.
for the Lord Jesus. So that was really what drives the book. I mean, I was just reflecting that there are loads of exceptions, but
Mm.
for a lot of us in our 50s and 60s, if we got married, if God's given us children, the children will be beginning to move towards leaving home. We may well have some elderly parents with increasing needs for care. It may be that we have a bit less by way of money pressures. It may be we have a bit more time. Many of us go through those decades with pretty good health. And
Uh-huh.
so it's a sort of strange time. I've got on my shelf three books, I think, really good books about old age, at least two of them printed in a rather large font,
Yep.
probably for a reason. But I wasn't aware of things for this kind of in-between stage.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the large font. That started on me somewhere in my 40s, and I realized holding things up close doesn't make them easier to see anymore. And that's just the beginning of the changes. They just keep coming. But Christopher, my father-in-law is a consultant, and he's been a kind of a free consultant for me, and I've appreciated it so much. We talk a lot about what it looks like, leadership and life in this stage in particular. But he likes to say, the 50s are your most productive decade, and the 60s are maybe second only to that. And what we lose in vigor or maybe vitality, we've gained wisdom, and we've gained perspective, and like you say, some freedom. The kids probably are out of the house, and now, to use his phrase, it's like we're like a racehorse on a dry track. It just feels like almost like a second wind. There's an opportunity to do something with this span of time that we're given. Looking back on that span of time for you, how would you articulate how the Lord used that season in your life?
I think for me, my 50s were, in God's kindness, quite a productive time.
Hmm.
Although at the end of it, I had something of a nervous breakdown.
Hmm.
A little book I wrote a while back called Zeal Without Burnout arose out of that painful experience. But a lot of the 50s was felt fruitful.
Hmm.
It's hard to tell what's fruitful, isn't it? There'll be lots of surprises at the end of time.
Yeah, right.
But it felt like good period in terms of discipleship and ministry for me. My 60s, more ambiguous, probably.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. Although you did publish a 4-volume Christ-centered commentary on it, so yeah, that'll be bearing fruit. I trust long after both of us are in glory. But if Christ tarries, but well, let's also talk a little bit about the fact that it's less about, I think, the decades. It's more about life, circumstances, and some of those for people that, I mean, kids are being born later and later in life now, so
Yeah.
kids getting out of the house, that might be late 50s, for some of
Mm.
us. It will for me, actually. And then sometimes kids stay for a little longer after that. So some of these lines that sort of delineate one season of life for the next have gotten a little bit more blurry. But you're delving into all these different aspects of our lives that I think are applicable probably beyond 60s as well. And you began, which I'm glad you did, talking about the heart. And you did a contrast early on about, we all know what gray hair is, where it comes from and why, but you talk about a gray heart, and they don't necessarily go together, do they?
No, they don't. They don't. And I've tried in the book. I was just aware that, as you rightly say, David, our circumstances differ so much. For every generalization I gave, there'll be people saying, yeah, but it's not me. So
Right.
I tried really to address questions of the heart, guarding the heart, seeking a pure heart, which is why I began and ended the book with chapters on the heart, a wise heart and a quiet heart,
Yes.
trying really, I suppose my model would be some of the Puritans who were writing very pastoral things
Yes.
about the heart of the believer. And I haven't done it very well, although my sentences aren't quite as long as some of those.
Thank you for that. So let's talk about some of these areas that you addressed, that, and maybe some concerns that you're seeing as well, because they kind of go back and forth, don't they? There are, you said, it's a fork in the road. There's a trap in many of these categories, but there's also an opportunity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so let's talk about these at length. I mean, suss these out a little bit for us. One of the early chapters, you talk about prayer in particular. What have you seen, and what's on your heart related to prayer for the afternoon of life?
I think what's on my heart is the on the downside, the danger of postponing things and thinking, later in life I'll have more time and then I'll be a man or a woman of prayer.
Yeah.
And really saying, no, you use the 50s and 60s as a kind of learning afresh to pray more deeply. I can remember probably 20 years ago asking the Lord to help me to learn to pray. And I mean, like all of us, I'm very conscious of shortcomings, but that desire, that yearning to be someone whose life is shaped by
Right.
prayer and praise. And I want to encourage people in their 50s and 60s to be intentional, not just to drift, but to think, I want to be a man, I want to be a woman who gives myself to prayer. I mean, I've made some practical suggestions about praying, if you have a Christian husband or wife, or praying with in my case, I pray with a couple of men.
Yeah.
Most weeks, or the church, when the church gathers for prayer, all sorts of things like that, and praying on your own. But I've tried I think my kind of inspiration is people like Simeon and Anna,
Mm-hmm.
early in Luke's gospel. I mean, they presumably are in the evening of life, but to think I'd love to become like them,
Right.
someone who's waiting and hoping and praying, and that shapes my life. So I'm hoping in that chapter in the book that people will think, yes, by God's grace, I could do this.
Yeah.
And to think I want to make this not just a kind of add on to my life, but something which I really want to do.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a heart attitude, I think, in all of this. There are people who are actually really quite young, at least especially as we as our perspective on such things is today. But yet they have this sort of I don't know what to call it. Maybe a little pessimistic, just kind of focusing on being older, getting older, feeling older, acting older, almost like a giving up. And then you encounter people who, I mean, beyond their 60s even, who are just determined to live life to the fullest before God. And whether it's new skills or connecting with younger generations on purpose or who knows what, they just seem to go from strength to strength, even as body deteriorates and technically strength is deteriorating, but there's something else going on. And I can't help but think that a good bit of that is a spiritual vitality that comes from a nearness to the Lord.
Yes, yes. And I took us the kind of theme verse for one of my chapters
Uh-huh.
in Romans 8, the body being dead
Yes.
because of sin, and the spirit being life because of
Yes.
righteousness, because it seemed to encapsulate things very crisply.
Yeah.
So being realistic about under the shadow of death. So I talked about, my knee hurts because of sin,
Yeah.
which is a bit provocative, but also thinking about the inward renewal, as you say, the kinds of people you described just now. I'd love,
Yeah.
great to meet someone like that. You think, yes, this is wonderful.
Yeah. It strikes me. So now I realize we're coming from two different cultural perspectives, at least when it comes to sports. So this is the American football season, and we enjoy that in our house. But those games are often won, if they're always won, in the second half. And it does strike me. You get to this phase of life, and the game plan shifts, the mindset shifts, and there's something that feels vitally important about what happens now. And I was just talking with a dear friend of mine who's a pastor, and we both decided to read John Owen's On the Mortification of Sin, which
Mm.
is not an easy read, but it just feels urgent now,
Yes.
because there's less road ahead of us, and we look at our souls, I think, before the Lord, if we're being honest and saying, there has been growth, praise the Lord, but there's some things that feel like that garden hasn't been well tended. Is it,
Yes.
am I gonna turn my heart, more deeply towards the things of the Lord, and in some ways maybe get a little bit more intentional about the sin that is still besetting there, and what does the Lord want to do, and what does he want me to do, in that.
And it's a great thing, isn't it? If instead of focusing on the deterioration of my body or my mind and hoping that the doctors can fix it, if instead I recognize that it's all because of sin,
Yes.
and therefore I'm going to hate sin more,
Mm.
and I'm going to seek to the battle against sin. Because my body may be getting weaker, but the temptations don't get any weaker. They may shift a bit, and to think, no, I hate sin, and I want to be fighting that battle by God's grace
Yeah.
right to the end, exactly as you say.
What a profound thought. And with every passing year, there's something else that aches or creaks or whatever. So that's only going to increase as we go. And you're making a profound suggestion. I'm sure others have brought this up. Maybe someone somewhere in the Puritan writings or something. But for me, it was a new thought when you articulated it. That no, this really actually every pain that you feel with aging, and recognizing that the fact that our bodies must die, that is the effect of sin.
Yeah.
And sometimes death actually comes directly from sin, but it's always an effect of sinfulness in general, right?
Yes.
What a fascinating focus
Yeah.
spiritually.
Yeah. And I think we've got so used to putting in that kind of caveat that a particular suffering or illness often isn't a one-to-one consequence of a
Hmm.
particular sin, though it can be.
Right.
We got so used to that caveat that we forget what you've just said, which is the Romans 5 thing, that death came into the world through sin.
Hmm.
And so it is all because I'm a sinner in a world under sin. That's why my knee hurts.
That's right. That's right. And so let's pivot. Let's turn. I'm just looking at your book now. The next chapter is the gospel. You've got a chapter on the gospel for those who are in this afternoon season of life, which we always keep coming back to the gospel, that we have to. And we've just been talking about our frustrations with sin that is still with us in this body of flesh that we occupy. So speak some joy and truth and hope that comes from the gospel truth that we are needing to saturate ourselves in now.
Yes, I think I wanted to try to get across that as we go through the years, the gospel becomes more and more precious. It doesn't become a tired thing that we just got used to and we say, oh, I know that.
Right.
Our pastor is preaching through Romans, and he was preaching one of the early passages about justification by grace alone, through faith alone. And most of us in church would have thought, yeah, I know that. But there was a sense of, this is wonderful, and I need this, and I need this more than ever. And so I wanted to try to sort of get something of that across, so that I'll go through my 50s and 60s treasuring the gospel more than ever and thinking, if the Lord gives me strength to use my time, my money for Jesus and his gospel, then that'd be a great thing to do. I think I quoted a former colleague of mine who, when he was, I think he was just coming up, was he early 50s? I can't remember. He was somewhere in this window, and he said to me, I think I've got one more decade of good ministry in me.
Right.
And he and his wife took off to Kenya, as it happened, for a Christian ministry. And, it wasn't like he was 25. He was in his 50s, and I thought, good for you. And there's that sense of adventure with the Lord. So I've tried to communicate something of that sense of go and join a new church plant, do something, have a sense of adventure, rather than thinking I'm just going to keep treading on the same track.
What a great conversation. More of that coming up in the next couple of programs. But for today, Christopher Ash, thank you for being with us.
It's very good to be with you, and I hope and pray it'll be a blessing to those listening.
This is Haven Today. I'm David Wollen. My guest today was Christopher Ash. And if you couldn't see him, you could hear his smile through his voice. That tone carries through also into his book, Not Old, Not Young, Not Done. It's about following Jesus in the afternoon of life. People don't talk about this time of life so much, but he does. He points out common tripping hazards. He gives encouragement for running this part of your race well. And so often we know it's the latter part of the race that wins or loses the race. And I want to run well. What about you? Not old, not young, not done is our way of saying thank you for your gift to Haven today. Give us a call at 865-HAVEN, 865-HAVEN, or online at haventoday.org. The website again, haventoday.org. I'm David Wollen. Won't you come back again next time? We'll be keeping it all about Jesus. It's the great story here on Haven Today.